Hi, I'm Pat and welcome back to the channel. Today I have this anti-sway bar that I'm going to install on my 2019 Toyota Tacoma TRD Pro. If you're new to the channel, please click on the subscribe button and ring that bell for notifications. I like producing cool car content, and today we have the Hellwig anti-sway bar for the Toyota Tacoma. Now, why did I buy this anti-sway bar when I have such a good suspension on this truck? Well, let's go into it. The Toyota Tacoma TRD Pro has amazing suspension, this Fox suspension. You can see the coilovers there nice and red. This allows the truck to travel up and down on off-road conditions, like Baja conditions, and it does a real great job. The problem is when I'm driving it on the day-to-day, I go around a turn, it leans, all my groceries go toppling. So this anti-sway bar is going to help keep this truck upright because I want to drive it on the road for the most part. So I got this Hellwig kit. There's a link in the description for your convenience. It comes with the anti-sway bar and all the hardware that I'm going to need in order to get it on this truck. The only thing I'm going to have to do is use a 1/2-inch drill bit, and I picked up a Cobalt drill bit today in order to get some things drilled in the frame, because this Hellwig is going to get installed right onto the axle, but it's also going to have to bolt up onto the frame. Now, the instructions that come with the kit are very easy to understand. Of course, they talk about how it needs to be set up in the truck, as well as some other pictures here that help you get an idea of where you need to set this thing up. But it clearly has some instructions here about what you need to do from top to bottom. And I'm going to start by drilling 1/2-inch holes into the frame, because that's important before we really start to bolt anything on. And as we could see here in the instructions, they also have what we need to torque each bolt down to. So this is really good. We're going to have to connect to the axle, and we're also going to have to connect to some end links, and those end links are going to be connected to the frame. Be sure to have your protective gear on, because as you're starting to drill this, you're going to get pieces of steel coming down on you. So the instructions here show that you have to drill a hole in between two of these bolts. There's a cross member here, and I found these two bolts and I measured approximately in the middle, which is about 1.5 inches, and then 1 1/8 inches in between the two sides. And I used a center punch in order to create a hole there. And I did the same for the other side as well. I think you might be able to see it right up in here. So now I'm going to take a 1/2-inch drill bit and start to make that hole. So I realized that my measurement was actually off. I was down too low, so I'm going to come up a little bit further here. It'll probably encapsulate this drill mark where I was, but this is going to get me more in the center because I clearly didn't measure correctly the first time. I found some extra touch-up paint in the garage I wasn't using, so I went ahead and added a bunch of that to these holes in order to cover the steel parts. And I'm just thinking about rust preventative. Okay, so we have a couple packets of lubricant here in this hardware bag, and the first instruction is saying to apply the lubricant to the D-shaped bushings. So first things first, I'm just going to put some lubricant here on my finger, and then I can apply it to the inside of the bushing. This does have an opening in it. There is a slit here, so that's going to be my next job, is to get it over the sway bar. Now I'm going to apply a little bit more lubricant on the bar itself so that any lubricant that came off as I was sliding this on here gets replaced, because I know it's kind of thin right now. Now I have all my hardware laid out, so these little D-shaped things are going to go over top of those bushings, and we have our U-bolts as well as washers and nuts, and these things are going to go against the axle itself. So this is going to go around the differential, and these are going to point towards the back of the truck and get bolted here onto the axles. And all the instructions, we'll follow these when we get underneath. Okay, just a heads up with these washers. So there's smaller washers and bigger washers. Clearly you can hear there's a difference. These larger washers, they go through the U-bolts as well as the connection to the frame. These smaller ones are for the end link hardware. So make sure that you use these bigger ones instead of these smaller ones when assembling both the U-joints and the connections of the end links to the frame. So before we start this procedure, there is a weld on the axle of the Tacoma, and I'm going to mount this just outside that weld. So actually the axle housing, there's a divot out here where it gets skinnier. So we don't want to go out this far. We want to be just in here, inbound to this weld, and it's the same on both sides. So I'm just going to go ahead and start by hanging my U-bolt over the top, but ultimately it's going to be angled here towards the back. We just want to make sure that we do not come in contact with the brake line. So same on the other side. Here is the weld, and we're going to put the U-bolt right here, and it's going to end up angled back towards the back of the vehicle. The next thing we have here are these saddle devices. These will slide over top of the U-bolt and rest against the axle. And then we have the D, this guy. That's also going to sit here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start one of these bolts on this U-bolt with the included washer, just one, no lock washer, and this bolt. Now I have my metric set out, and I was able to use a 19 millimeter here. So I'm just going to use this to start it. That way it can hold everything together and prepare it to receive the sway bar. Next, I'm going to take our sway bar, and we want these end links to face towards the back of the vehicle. I'm going to go ahead and, the best I can, get this bushing lined up and see if I can get it into this assembly that I pre-started here. Yeah, with a little bit of magic it works. So I'll go ahead and put the washer and bolt on this side of the U-bolt, or washer and nut rather, on this side of the U-bolt, just to hold it in place while I go work on the other side. Next, it says we need to lubricate and install the hourglass bushings into the end link components. So here's our end links, and here are the hourglass bushings, and there are 4 of these. So each one of these will get installed in here after we lube them up. Now I've lubricated these up, but this is a tight fit. I tried to give it a squeeze with my hands, but it wouldn't work. So I have a rubber mallet, and there we go. That's seated in there just fine. On to the rest of them. Next, we have these metal sleeves, and we need to lubricate these and then press them into the inside of these bushings. All right, so just a heads up on the remaining hardware that's here. Obviously, the very large 1/2-inch washers, they're going to be parts of these 1/2-inch bolts that have these curved edges on them, the nuts. These are going to go on top of these, which go in the frame, which will hold this piece. Now, I do have 4 leftover flat nuts. These are going to double up on the U-joints. But let's go ahead and get the rest of this assembled. So I went ahead and took this piece. So this part, you just screw in the bolt that's there, and we're going to end up screwing that into this, and then we're going to be adding our hardware. So we're going to use this. We're going to put a washer on each end, just like this. Washer here, and then this is obviously a nut that is designed to be locking as well. So this is a curved side to it. And the same up here at the top. Now the bushing is going to ride right along this metal piece, and it's going to be the same for down here. It's actually going to ride right along the sway bar itself. So let's take a look at the instructions here. You can see in these pictures, it's kind of hard to see. But up here at the top, this is where it's going to ride right along the metal, and then down here at the bottom, it's going to ride right along the metal. So that's how this is supposed to be assembled. And this is going to be the piece that I put up into the frame, and then I'm going to use, you know, these bigger bolts in order to hold that. So I'm going to finish assembling these and then get back onto the truck. Okay, here I am on the passenger side. I'm going to take this 1/2-inch bolt that I had drilled the hole for. So that's a perfect fit. And then I'm going to take and attach the top of the sway bar. So I'm going to position it just like this and get it over that bolt, and then put the washer on it and this locking nut that has this sort of convex shape to it on the outside. All right, so get the bolt in first. Now I'm going to snug up these bolts that connect up to the frame next, so that they're all tight, at least snugged up, so this is a little bit easier to adjust. GoPro, stop recording. Okay, so I actually had to use an impact wrench. I gently, on a setting of 1, used a 3/4 inch impact in order to get this spun while I held it from the top. The problem is this locking nut, it just makes it incredibly difficult to use a socket. So yeah, not fun there. So I'm going to go ahead and also start to bring some of these other pieces of hardware together and tighten them up. This hasn't been torqued yet, but it's getting pretty tight. But that way I can start to align this side and then work on the passenger side. So I'm going to grab a 9/16 and 11/16 and start to tighten these down. All right, so things are pretty tight now. We actually have a pretty good end link at the top. It's just snugged up, but we're going to go ahead and connect the sway bar at the bottom. Now the instructions say that you want to try to make the sway bar parallel to the ground, or parallel to the frame in this case, since I have the back of the car up on some blocks here. And then what we would need to do is tighten this down until the two ends met up, and then just put the bolt through the middle hole for now. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and remove this hardware just so it's out of the way. And I'm going to bring the sway bar up and approximate where it should be, and then start tightening this up until we're approximately where we need to be. So this is just now a setting in the middle hole, and this hole is not the softest setting. The outside hole is the softest setting. Let me give you a closer look. Here's our sway bar, and there's 2 holes in here. There's one on this side, one on this side, and one in the middle. And they want you on the furthest one in order to make it soft. But for lining things up, they want us in the middle. So I'm trying to make this and the frame be about the same. And honestly, it's probably a little bit kind of high right now if I look at it from a distance. And for the sway bar itself, if I use the exhaust as the parallel to the ground, or even the spare tire over here, I can then set exactly where I need it to be. Obviously I'm up on this side of the car, the front's lower, so we're on a bit of a hill, if you will, and it looks like I may need to just make a slight adjustment. Now I'm clearly on the softest setting, which is further back in the holes, but yeah, I may need to come up just a tiny bit, but I think this is about it. I'm going to go ahead and snug everything up, and then we'll start torquing everything to spec. So before I go ahead and tighten down the bolts that are around the axle, what I'm trying to do is gauge about where they need to be at as far as rotation. So I'm looking at this side and comparing it to that side, and I'm right here under the middle of the hitch. So I'm trying to see whether or not these look about parallel. I think I may need to bring that side up a tiny bit based upon my judgment. It doesn't have to be perfect. So I'm going to rotate this a little bit so that that bar on this side comes up a little bit. All right, let's go over the torque values. Obviously, this one at the very top here is the same as, you know, these here on the axle. So these are 65, and then everything else, as far as the end links are concerned, these are 45. So we're going to go ahead and torque these to 65, as well as the ones up here on the frame, and then 45 for the end links. All right, so everything is torqued down to spec here and here and these, and I've also put the other bolts on top. They actually had this in the instructions to be able to double these up, and then this nut right here locks everything into place as far as this. So these are locked up, that's locked up, and then these are all torqued to spec on both sides. And so the next step will be to take it out for a spin and see how she handles. So it's been a month. I've actually had this anti-sway bar in the back of the Toyota Tacoma for the past month, and I had to make a minor adjustment in order to make it more effective. As you can see, I decided to move it to the innermost hole in order to give even more anti-sway than what they initially recommended I set this to. And I believe that has a lot more to do with this being a TRD Pro than a factory standard Toyota Tacoma. So we're going to take it for a little spin and show you exactly what it feels like. It's very hard for me to show you that, but at least I can go through the motions. So one thing about the TRD Pro is it's lifted. And because it's lifted and the suspension is different than the stock Toyota Tacoma, of course, that means that there's a chance that you're going to get different results over a stock Tacoma. Now, I saw that this anti-sway bar was highly recommended on the forums for the Tacoma. And I also saw one review on Amazon that said, you know, for the TRD Pro or for a lifted truck, it would make better sense if that anti-sway bar was heavier or thicker. And that will provide a little bit more stability, in my opinion. Now, granted, this is better than stock. You know, I can go around these turns and I don't feel like I'm as top heavy. So there is a difference there. But I believe in the TRD Pro, it's less of a difference than it would be in the stock truck. So I'm just taking a trip around the neighborhood here, just generally talking about this bar. And I think it's a great upgrade. It's very simple to do. It is very recommended by me. I just think it'll work better in a stock Toyota Tacoma. Now, sometimes when you install an aftermarket sway bar, it may cause some noise, maybe especially where some of those parts are connected, or it may bump up against some things. I'm not noticing any of that. It's almost as if it was back to factory, but I get a little bit better stability. So definitely a plus with that. And I believe that on the stock Toyota Tacoma, if you set it to the softest setting, you'll probably be okay. But, you know, I'm also a sports car driver, as you know, if you've been watching my channel. And that means that I like to have more stability in the corners. And I don't necessarily feel as though I'm sacrificing anything because it's an anti-sway bar. It's not generally going to make the truck ride any harsher. It's just going to give me a little bit more stability in the corners. So yeah, generally I'm happy with it. In fact, I'm going to continue to keep it on the truck, continue to use it. And I might even reach out and ask, you know, if there's a thicker sway bar option that might be available for the TRD Pro, because I think it would make a significant improvement over this particular bar. So if you like today's video, please give me a big thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, click on the subscribe button and ring that bell for notifications. I like producing cool car content, and you're not going to want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and happy motoring.